Good morning, everyone. After historic success last week in passing the largest deficit reduction in history, House Republicans are back hard at work delivering on our commitment to America and protecting American families from President Biden and extreme far-left Democrats' bans and burdensome regulation. Since day one in the Oval Office, Joe Biden and his administration have been waging war on American energy. Now they are targeting gas stoves, the preferred cooktop appliance for tens of millions of Americans. Sadly, this isn't new. In my home state of New York, extreme far-left Democrats, like our governor, Kathy Hochul, instituted the first statewide ban on gas stoves despite widespread bipartisan disapproval from hardworking New York families. I was proud to lead a letter alongside my New York Republican colleagues pushing back on this radical, insane, and painful overreach. This week, House Republicans will proudly pass the Save Our Gas Stoves Act and the Gas Stove Protection and Freedom Act. As the American people know, Joe Biden and his administration have used every tool available to circumvent approval from Congress to pass his costly and inflationary agenda. In 2022, the Biden administration proposed more than $1 trillion in new regulations, pushing the price onto the American taxpayer. House Republicans are once again bringing to the floor the REINS Act to prevent the executive branch's extreme overreach in the federal rulemaking process to protect the American people who are already suffering from historic inflation. As we do every week, we will feature a freshman later on in this press conference, John James, when he arrives. But I'm proud to turn it over to one of the lead sponsors of one of our key bills this week, Debbie Lesko from Arizona.
Thank you, Elise, and good morning, everyone. Americans are struggling to pay for groceries, rent, and gasoline. The border is wide open, and fentanyl is killing our kids. Chinese spy balloons are floating over America. And what does the Biden administration do that's so important? He has a war against gas stoves. In February, the Department of Energy proposed a rule that, according to a DOE report and other studies, will eliminate 100% of freestanding gas stoves and 96% of gas stove cooktops that are currently available on the market today. That's outrageous. That is why I introduced the Save Our Gas Stoves Act to block this radical, out-of-touch rule that eliminates the types of stoves and features of stoves that consumers like. I am grateful to Speaker McCarthy, Leader Scalise, Conference Chair Stefanik, Energy and Commerce Chair McMorris Rogers, my Republican colleagues, a growing number of my Democratic colleagues, the Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers, National Association of Home Builders, the American Gas Association, the American Public Gas Association, and the Arizona Restaurant Association for their support. Let's protect consumer choice. Let's save our gas stoves. And now I'd like to yield to my colleague, John James.
Congressman John James from Michigan 10. I'm voting yes on the REINS Act because we're done subsidizing those who would hurt us. We're done building the middle classes in China on the backs of ours. I'm voting for the REINS Act this week because my district is currently being suffocated by out-of-control government regulation. Michigan's 10th congressional district is America's #1 manufacturing district. The auto industry is our lifeblood. That also means that we are on the front lines of the EV revolution. When speaking with leaders from the Detroit 3 and auto workers, I hear the exact same thing. The federal government is forcing American auto workers to conform to strict standards on impossible timelines for product customers don't want. It's comply or die. The Constitution never intended to give unelected bureaucrats the authority to make these kind of rules. The REINS Act is a vital step to rolling back these destructive regulations and reasserting Congress's authority to legislate, and it provides a key check on the executive branch. It's time to rein in harmful federal regulations that are costing hard-working Americans trillions of dollars each year. Red tape is silently choking the American dream, and it stops with the Republican conference in this Congress. Thank you.
We'll now hear from our whip, Tom Emmer.
Thank you, Elise. Thank you, John and Debbie. If I learned anything during my years playing a sport that was given to us from God, because we know ice only exists in heaven, if I learned anything from that experience as a player and as a coach, championship teams are not created the very first day of practice. First, you have to build a team. You have to then get the team to work together, to believe in something as a group. Then you have to develop a strategy. In sports, it's called a game plan on how the team can win. The debt limit fight last week displayed just how far House Republicans have come as a team. A lot of people in this room were looking back in January saying, how can these Republicans actually want to run a one-car parade? That was the single greatest experience we could have had the first day of practice, as people were out on the field running into each other with different ideas, with different perspectives, and it's only improved from there. Each and every week, it has been another success for Republicans in the House, and last week was no different. This was a concerted effort that started at the very beginning of this Congress, when House Republicans realized that we have to take the lead in solving our soaring debt crisis in a divided government, because God knows they're not doing it over in the Senate, where their biggest accomplishment before we gave them the bill last week was making maple syrup, March maple syrup month, in the White House, that now wants to run to the finish line and say that they somehow made this thing happen. It was only Kevin McCarthy and House Republicans that made this happen. Republicans spent months learning to work together and developing the ideas that became the initial debt ceiling bill, which forced President Biden to the negotiating table and ultimately led to a historic debt ceiling deal. By the way, also known as the largest deficit reduction bill in the history of this country. Joe Biden and the Democrats got nothing out of this deal. And I wish somebody in this room would start to scrutinize the garbage that they're spewing about how they protected this and that when it wasn't even part of the agreement. Republicans protected it. Our only concession, by the way, was averting an economic disaster that would have hurt American families and small businesses. Meanwhile, Republicans secured $2.1 trillion in spending cuts and put Congress on a path toward fiscal responsibility for years to come. Our conference promised Americans that we would not sit idly by while the Democrats continue to spend this country into oblivion. And this week, and last week, we used the debt limit to follow through on that pledge. Month after month, bill after bill, House Republicans are changing the way business is done in Washington, bringing common sense back to our nation's capital. It's time to stop underestimating Speaker McCarthy and the House Republicans. And now I turn it over to the leader, Rip Scalise.
Thank the hockey player from Minnesota. And we've got another busy week. And really, if you look at the agenda this week, it's like a lot of the weeks you've seen over the last few months we've been in the majority. It's Republicans fighting for the hardworking families across this country who are struggling under the weight of all the crazy extremist regulations coming out of the Biden administration. From bad energy policies to a bad border policy that's led to devastation across our country, fentanyl deaths, millions of people coming into our country, to now what we're seeing from the Department of Energy and the CFSB, the idea that you would ban gas stoves. Does the Biden administration not have more serious problems to deal with than trying to tell families in America what kind of stove they should be cooking their food on? And yet that's what we're seeing from the Biden administration, literally a plan to ban gas stoves. And this is coming from an administration who just a few weeks ago said they weren't going to do it, a few months ago, actually. You know, at the beginning of the year, they said, don't worry, we're not going after gas stoves, after they saw what happened in Elise Stefanik's state, where they went after gas stoves. Biden administration said they weren't going to do it until they then went after it and did it. And families are looking at this saying, Why are you going to continue going after these hardworking families? They're trying to tell you what kind of car you can drive by banning gasoline and diesel engines. Then they're going to try to tell you what kind of stove you can use in your house or what kind of oven you can buy. You saw this during COVID when they tried to tell parents, don't worry, you shouldn't be worrying about your kids' education and seeing what's going on in the classroom. Stay out of the classroom. We'll take care of that. And parents realized what was going on in the classroom and said, no, we are going to have a say in what's happening in our kids' classroom. We want to have a say in how we live our lives. We don't want government control. And you saw this over and over during COVID where people actually did have choices, where they could move out of states that were trying to control every aspect of their life, and they moved toward states that gave them freedom. Look at the states that lost population and the states that gained population during COVID. New York, California, Illinois, go down the line. All of those states lost hundreds of thousands of people. And states like Texas, Florida, Tennessee, where they believed and embraced freedom, were the ones that were growing. And that trend continues. But in Washington, they haven't figured it out because they've got these extremist control freaks running some of these agencies that wake up every day coming up with these crazy ideas about how to change your life. And it's hurting hardworking families. It's not like these decisions don't have a cost. Just look at the stove example. A gas stove compared to an electric stove, a gas stove actually costs less money. And if the government's banning it, it's not going to affect the billionaire friends of Democrats. It's going to affect those lower and middle income families who are already struggling from the other devastating far left extremist ideas coming out of the Biden administration. Think about what's happening today. OPEC is getting ready to control and limit production of energy because they want a higher price of gasoline. Now, that's a pretty big news story today. And it's going to be something that has a real negative effect on families all across America who are already paying 50% higher in gasoline costs. But that would not even be a news story today if the Biden administration stopped attacking American energy. If we were able to produce all that we can here in America with the safest environmental standards of any energy producing country in the world, then OPEC's decision today would be irrelevant because it wouldn't affect oil prices because America could pick up the difference. America could produce more, and the price of oil and natural gas would actually be going down. So these decisions coming out of the Biden administration day after day and month after month are having devastating impacts on hardworking families. It's like the REINs Act. It's like the bill going after Chevron deference that we're bringing up this week also, because all of these decisions are costing families thousands of dollars a year that it's taken out of their pocket to appease some unelected extremist bureaucrat in the Biden administration. Enough is enough. Republicans are standing up for those hardworking families. I hope we get a lot of Democrats that vote for these bills too, and frankly, I think we will on some of them. But at some point, the Biden administration is going to have to start listening to those families who are sick and tired of having to pay the cost for the extremist ideas of these control freaks working in these agencies that just want to tell you how to live your life at a higher cost than what you were paying just 2 years ago. With that, we'll take questions. You were quick. That was a quick move.
Thank you, Leader Scalise. What's your reaction to a whistleblower allegation that the executive branch has been keeping Congress in the dark about collecting alien aircraft and debris and using it to develop technology?
Well, I haven't seen that report. Obviously, we're concerned about Congress being kept in the dark from a lot of these agencies. You just saw Jamie Comer yesterday announced that there will be contempt of Congress charges brought against Wray if he doesn't turn over documents to the committee. You saw Mike McCall last week finally getting Secretary Blinken to turn over those descent cables from the Afghanistan debacle when Blinken initially wasn't going to inform Congress of the things that we ought to have. We have a legal oversight ability to see there. After a threat of contempt of Congress, Blinken finally turned that over to the committee. So our committees are doing robust oversight. We've seen a lot of stonewalling from federal agencies on a lot of fronts. Yes, back there. Yeah. Yeah. Come on now. Talk about hockey or no?
Congressman, I'm interested, what kind of challenge was it for you with Republican votes with fiscal responsibility act last week? Do you view it as
Republicans have been succeeding since the beginning of the year. If you were here for my remarks, you would know. Do not underestimate Kevin McCarthy and the House Republicans.
We'll add to that. Go look historically at how many Republicans, in the percentage of Republicans in previous Republican majorities voted for a debt ceiling package, because this one actually addressed spending, lowered spending, went after some of the radical regulations coming out from the Biden administration. So a much higher percentage of Republican votes than we've seen in the past as well. Yes? I don't know about that particularly. Obviously, the members of the committee have been much more involved in the whistleblowers. We have heard some alarming reports about the concerns that some of these whistleblowers that are coming forward are expressing, some of the abuse and harassment they've been getting from the agencies. Look, there are whistleblower protection laws that are on the books for a reason, and if any whistleblower is being threatened, that needs to be taken very seriously by the Justice Department. It's the law to protect whistleblowers who come forward. Whether those allegations are valid or not is something that Congress and law enforcement need to decide. But if somebody brings a whistleblower complaint, it needs to be looked into without threat of attack, harm, or retribution.
Thank you. This morning, the White House circulated to the press the Washington Post article stating that the allegation contained in the document was reviewed by the FBI at the time, and I'm quoting from the sound.
When you say the document, are you talking about the document that Jamie Comer is seeking from Ray to have the full access from the committee?
Yeah, this is what they
Yeah.
is taken the article. And they say, according to the sources familiar with the investigation, was found to not be supported by the facts. How do you respond?
Well, why would the White House then be trying to block the facts from coming out? Because they are. Right now, Jamie Comer is having to threaten a contempt of Congress action because the committee's not able to get access to the documents. And think about what these documents allege. I mean, again, these are allegations. The Committee of Jurisdiction, Oversight, has the ability to get these documents under law, and the White House and the FBI are trying to block our ability to exercise our legal right to go look at those documents. But they deal with an allegation made by a whistleblower that when he was vice president, Joe Biden may have been involved in a quid pro quo pay-to-play scheme. That's something everybody in the press ought to be looking into as well. Whether it happened or not, when you're blocking the facts from even coming to light, how can you say the facts don't back it up? Because the White House is blocking us from even being able to see the facts. So we've got a legal right to get those documents, and we're going to do it, and that's why the contempt of resolution has been put on the table. Yeah.
As a member of
Yeah,
Intel. As a member of Intel who has been very involved in FBI oversight, the FBI is not above the law, and congressional committees have oversight of this agency. We have seen again and again on issues their refusal to comply with congressional requests, refusal to even come testify in front of the Hill. That needs to change. We are elected by the American people and are accountable to the American people, not unelected bureaucrats who are abusing their positions of authority. You asked a question about the unmasking. The request is for the document, and you can black out the name in those requests. And it's not just the FBI. We've seen this from the Secretary of State as well, and I want to echo what the leader said in terms of praising Chairman McCall's leadership, Chairman Turner, and Chairman Comer on how they've handled this. But on the whistleblower subject as well, I remember not that long ago when everyone in the press corps was eager to make sure Congress opened an investigation when it came to a whistleblower allegation. And I find it very frustrating that the press now believes that Congress should not even look into a valid whistleblower claim.
Yeah.
The former president seems to indicate that he believes an indictment is coming soon from the special counsel's office. We saw Chairman Jordan send a letter asking for more information from the special counsel. What role are House Republicans going to play in terms of publicly defending the former president should an indictment come as his legal challenges continue?
Well, we put a committee in place to look into the weaponization of government. We've seen this on so many fronts where you've got some people in some federal agencies who have abused their power to go after their political enemies. That is not the role of the federal government. You see that happening in banana republics. It should never be accepted in the United States of America. And we've seen it from a number of federal agencies, some people within them, bad actors who are part of the federal bureaucracy, and we're going to root it out because we've seen it. We've got a committee that's in place to look into it in a much more detailed way. Not sure where that ultimately is going. Obviously, we're looking into a lot of things that we've seen in terms of direct examples of abuses of federal agencies. We'll do one more. Yeah. Now, I know I've been working with Andrew Clyde and others. Richard Hudson has the bill as well to deal with pistol braces, and it's something we're going to be bringing to the floor. There is talk that the Senate may be bringing a companion bill from Senator Kennedy this week. We'll see if the Senate takes up action, but the House has been working on passing the bill. The problem's been with the vote count. There's some members that aren't there yet, and we're working on getting those members there. And in fact, Andrew Clyde has been helping us with some of the members who aren't quite there yet because we want the bill to pass. This is an abuse by the ATF against people who use these pistol braces. There are a lot of retired military veterans, disabled military veterans who use those braces to exercise their Second Amendment rights where they otherwise wouldn't be able to. So we want to bring the bill to the floor, but we want the bill to pass in 4 weeks now. This is, long before last week's votes. For weeks, that bill has had some issues with some members who aren't yet there. They're working to get there. We're trying to get there. We want the bill to pass. So, yep. All right, well, one last question. We'll finish it.
Did leadership tell Clyde that if he didn't vote for the Fiscal Responsibility Act, that his bill would not get on the floor?
No.
It's harder to get on the floor. So what he's saying is not true.
No, well, no, that's not what he said. He said that there would be problems with the bill passing. There were problems with the bill passing before. And look, he and I have worked on this for a while. He knows who some of those members are who aren't yet for the bill, who weren't for it weeks ago. There might be a few more that aren't for it now, but we're working through that, and we're working to get the bill passed. What's most important is that the bill pass. So the bill ultimately will pass the House. I'm hoping it'll pass the Senate. May pass the Senate this week, but we also want the bill to pass the House. What's important is when it comes up, that it actually pass, and we're pushing and working hard to make that happen. Thank you.